morning, everybody. Welcome once again to the 411 Word Multicultural Gospel Service, Cornerstone Bible Table Talk. I'm Minister Clayton Bridget, and this morning with me I have my big brother in Christ, Chaplain Craig Poole, and I got a new panel member this morning. This is my other brother, Sam the Weatherman. I did over 20 years in the United States Air Force. 30. 30 years. There we go. That's right. And he was our resident weatherman back then. And he's still our resident weatherman when it comes to people, because he sets the climate and can tell you the temperature of everybody's attitude. So we welcome you this morning, Sam. Thank you. As we get ready to talk this morning about our subject that we said we were going to talk about was the perception of the church today. You know, this is a topic that I know that has sparked a lot of people in the past 10 years. That's true. And a lot of people just don't want to come to church for whatever reason. And we're gonna get into that this morning. Hopefully we get some hits and some likes and some true discussion about this topic as we talk about it this morning. Craig, could you bring us in the prayer?
Sure. God, we are excited to be here on this morning to discuss information that is pertinent to kingdom business. God, we know that you tabernacle with humanity. God, we know that your desire is for everyone to come to repentance. You desire for humanity to be saved, creation to be redeemed. And God, as we discuss issues pertaining to specifically the church, God, we pray that you anoint our minds, allow us to be relevant, allow us to be focused, but allow us to be God-centered. May those who are listening be blessed by the things that they hear, and also the things that they see this morning. It's through Jesus we pray. Amen.
All right. So as we get into this conversation, we get into this talk. You know, there's our technical expert here, Myra Dotson's filling in for our brother Matt this morning. So as we get into this topic on this morning, you know, one of the things that resonates with me is I remember a couple of years ago I did a message about quit church, and people looked at me kind of strange when I did that message, but the message wasn't about quitting church in the sense of not going, but it was about quitting church in the sense of how we're doing church right now, meaning that, you know, we got to get away from the whole thing about, well, I'm going to church to check the block, or I'm going to church to see who's there, to see what such and such is going to wear today. I'm going there to see if the pastor is really talking to me because I really need him to speak to me today. You know, those type of things. But what we have to look at in the bigger picture of what God had for us when it came down to the church was, if you look in Hebrews 10, verses 24 and 25, if I remember correctly, Craig, it talks about God wanting us to go to church for the good works that we do, but not to ignore fellowship. Right. Okay, not for us to not be around one another, because we are creatures that have been created to be with people, you know, and to associate with people and to talk. And so as we do that, we want to talk about the perception today of the church, because a lot of people, I think and I'm saying a lot of people, because when you look at churches as you go around, not necessarily the mega churches, but some of the medium-sized and smaller churches, their numbers are getting smaller and smaller.
Churches, mega churches too.
Right, you know, and of course COVID has played a part in that, with the pandemic and everything, and social distancing, and people going to doing what we're doing right now, Facebook Live or even YouTube and things like that. But the fellowship, we're missing out on the fellowship.
Yes.
And now that people are getting vaccinated and people are starting to increase their numbers or whatever, you're feel safe. But where are we going to be at in 2 years, right? So I'm going to open it up because I know that at this point, and we talked a little bit before we started broadcasting, we got people that are looking for church homes, and they want something that they're used to, or they're looking for something special. And I just remember telling somebody that a while back that people want to always say, well, I got to go and I got to find a perfect church. But sometimes you got to look at yourself.
That's true.
Because that perfect church may not be there because of you and the way that you're thinking and the way that you feel about where you're going to be at when it comes to it. So, Sam, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that there's actually been, when you talk about the younger generation, a shift. I think that when they were growing up, they were going to the churches that we were accustomed to, the older, smaller churches. Then there was a shift to the mega church. A lot of people started going to that.
Right.
But I think a lot of them used to find what they wanted. They were idle. And what I've seen is that they're still looking and trying to actually, some of them start their own churches because they're still not finding what they're looking for.
Right.
Because we're not relating to them because of the age difference.
Okay, yeah.
I think that's some of it. So I think the numbers are dropping in the smaller churches with the younger people, also in the mega churches, and they're going off doing their own thing and not necessarily in the church.
Okay.
When I say in the church, I mean in the four walls.
The four walls, yeah. And that's important for people to know because, again, the Bible says, when two or three are gathered, that's the church, really and truly. The people are the church. So, Craig, what's your thoughts?
Well, so when I consider the question, I think what we see is a radical departure from God. And I'll bring some more context later. But it's kind of what we discussed earlier. Sometimes questions are kind of loaded, right? I mean, we're talking about the perception of the church today. And that means things to different people. So, evangelical movement would really say one thing with regard to this perception of the church and what the church should be. Your mega churches would have a different paradigm when it comes to the church and what the church should be.
Yes.
Your historically black churches would have a different perspective, and so on and so on. So you have all these perspectives, and then the question becomes which one is right, right? So different groups look at one another, and our way is the right way. So I don't know if that's right. I think that, in essence, is a radical departure from God.
Okay.
Right? Then when we expand that just a little bit more, and we start talking culturally, if you take into account Western European theological thought, and then you superimpose that upon the context, then it's ripe for, man, I don't want to do church.
Okay.
That is not the God that I serve. So my simple answer is a radical departure from God.
And I didn't look at it that way. I'll be honest with you.
I didn't either.
I didn't see it that way. I think everything that you're saying right there is truly is really and truly on point because I grew up, in a Baptist church up until I met my wife, and then I, went to Church of God in Christ, and I used to just sit down and talk to my wife prior to, while her and I were dating, and just talking to her about church, and I didn't realize, right, that she was in church a lot, and Sam, I talked to Lolita, same thing. I didn't realize that people went to church that much. Now, I felt like I was in church a lot too as a kid, don't get me wrong.
Right.
You did Bible study, you did, your choir rehearsals on Saturdays, you know, and then you did, you know, church on Sundays, and then there was a program you went back. Man, I met people in my lifetime that said that church was like 5 days a week for them.
That's true.
You know, literally 5 days a week. And, but we don't have that anymore.
Right.
You know, we don't have that anymore. And again, I think that people just take Sunday as a check the block type mentality. You know, I'm going to go. I'm going to go. I'm just going to do that. And I think that's where I think right now we're losing young people. You know, like we were talking earlier, because you know I have a couple of groups that I do want to touch on that I want to talk about, but we're losing young people because a lot of young people feel like there's not anything in the church anymore for them. You hit it. You said it earlier. You were talking about your son. You know, I was talking about my daughter. Craig, we mentioned his son, his oldest son. We have a lot of kids that, and I say kids, and I don't mean to disrespect them that way, but they're our children, right? That whenever they turn 25, right, they get into a way, because now they're starting to find out who they want to be. When they turn more towards, you know, an older crowd. We got to have things for them to keep them, you know, in tune with God. And so,
somebody who's 50 years old.
okay,
So their 50-year-old is kind of different with the 20, 25.
young people, because like you're saying, the 50-year-olds are running the singles ministry. So now that we're talking about the seasoned saints, how do we get the seasoned saints to understand what the younger ones are looking for? You got an answer for that, Greg?
So again, it goes back to what I said. It's a radical departure from God. It's what each individual believes, right? So you're asking, for instance, and this is not picking. I hope you don't take it that way. We're asking about young people. Yet we, as middle-aged men, don't have a young person on here to engage in that conversation.
Exactly.
Right? So now it becomes what I think the young people need.
What we think.
Right. It is the church that I am accustomed to, the church that I grew up with. It is my experience with God as it pertains to how their experience ought to be with God. Right. And instead of saying, hey, young people, we want to come and we want to do this discussion, why don't y'all want to go to church? Right?
There you go.
I think that applies to whatever demographic we're speaking to. Whether it be the single parents, whether it be singles in general, whether it be teens, I think that applies to those demographics. But then the question is, well, why? Specifically to teenagers, I think at some point, I mean, they grow up. They don't see faith the same way mom and dad does. And can mom and dad accept that? You know, I can remember, and I smile about it because I can remember the first time my youngest son called me by my first name. Right? Well, Craig, he waited to see what I would do. I recognized it, healthy me, recognized it not as a threat to me as an adult, not as a threat to me as a parent, as much as it was a 14, 15-year-old boy testing the boundaries of adulthood, and in this case, manhood. If you frame the argument that way, right, and I hope you understand the way I'm framing that argument, then young people will test the boundaries of adulthood when it comes to spirituality.
Yes.
Now that might look something like, why do I have to go to church?
Right.
Well, I don't believe that God hates, right? But they are testing those boundaries. And the way we respond to those boundaries, I think, impacts their desire to go to church. That's just my thought you asked, right? So, and I stick with my answer.
Okay.
When I'm thinking about what you're saying, it could be from, think about the little kid in church. You bringing them and pulling them to sit in church next to you,
Right.
and they don't really want to be there.
Yeah.
So when they get older, they don't want to be in the church.
Right.
That could be a
Definitely.
a situation also, because
I mean, you think about it, and I'm gonna push you a little bit for a second. I mean, you think about it. You could ask that same question about homosexuals and their perception of the church, and as to why they don't want to come.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that, because there's a coworker of mine that I talk to periodically, and we have spiritual talks, and that was one of the conversations that we brought up. How can somebody that's homosexual, that's trying to love God, right, understand that the church loves them, but yet God hates homosexuality? You know what I mean? And I told him, I said, that's hard for me to explain, because I'm not God. My thoughts are not his thoughts. My ways are not his ways. Right? And that's scripture. And so that does push people. That pushes people. We know that the Catholic Church has, publicly announced, and it was in the news about a month ago, that we are not pushing away those that live homosexual / alternate lifestyles, right? We are welcoming them into the church.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should welcome everybody into the church, okay? Not to move people away, because what you do to one person, somebody else sees, and it makes them say, hey, I don't want to go to that church, because some people are looking for a church home.
And that's a paradigm shift. The reason the Catholic Church mentioned that, because for so long, not just the Catholic Church, other churches, they kind of shun people of homosexuality to come to the church.
Right.
So it's a paradigm shift for us to welcome them, and that's why they made that big announcement.
Exactly.
And other churches, we need to make that shift also if you want to bring them into the church.
That's true.
Yeah, see, I don't want to single out groups. I mean, so I work in a unique ministry context. Sam volunteers in that context, and one of the things that I'm with murderers.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
with
moving there.
pedophiles.
That is true.
You name it.
That's true.
They are there.
Right.
But I would tell you that even with that context, engaging them, we have some of the most impactful worship experiences
I agree with
that I've been a part of, right? But it takes engaging them, right?
Right.
It takes actively engaging them and finding out where they are. That group that I highlight, they have a keen sense for being judged,
Yes.
right? And if there's any hint of you judging them, they'd stay away from you. Now, but the converse is true. They are very judgmental.
Okay.
But then the question becomes how you engage that. So, yeah, I mean, so I could bring up addicts, right? I mean,
Right.
I don't mean to highlight homosexuals
Right, exactly.
as much as you have addicts, whether they be drug addicts or alcoholics. You have all of these fringe entities that make up the church.
Right.
Anyway,
All of them.
yeah.
I mean, you're hitting it right on the head, because you got to think about it. Not everybody in the church is always doing the right things. I mean, we all sin in some shape, form, or fashion, whether we know it or we don't know it.
That is true.
I mean, we have racists in the church.
Right, exactly. I mean, and I mean, it's there. It's there. And so these are just some of the things that I want to make sure that as we talk about the perception of the church, it's not just about, the people inside the church and how they view the outside world, but it's how people on the outside view the church on the inside. We got seasoned saints that want things to stay the same way, and they don't want to.
They don't want to change.
They don't want to change. They don't want to deviate from that.
That paradigm shift comes.
Exactly, but we're not asking them to change outside of praising God, okay? Because I remember when I got ready to graduate. I know me and Craig, we about the same age. Sam, you're a little older than us.
That's okay.
Whatever. But I graduated in '92. Okay, and when I graduated in 1992, I had truly given my life to Christ at that point. And I was remember when Kirk Franklin first came out. Okay,
They didn't want that played in the church.
They didn't want that played in the church. But what did that do? That was a generational thing that happened because you pulled the kids that were still trying to find out if they wanted to be with God or if they wanted to be in the world. But he brought something into everybody that was for everybody.
And so he tapped in a large audience.
He tapped into a large audience, and they're he's not going to last. And Kirk's still going. Here we are almost 30 years later, he's still going. And he's still
getting new audience.
New audiences all the time. And that's what I'm saying. That's why I say, the seasoned saints, no matter how old we get and how seasoned we are, we still have to look at ways of drawing not just young people, but people back into the church, and loving God,
I would add to that. My experience has been a little bit different. So, growing up within churches of Christ, typically you have your black church and your white church. And when we have an integrated church, usually it's not fully integrated.
Right.
And what I mean by that is in worship, either you worship in a black style or you worship in a white style. And the two really don't ever merge into one. We have that, right? But again, one of the classes that I had that was really good class, it was called contextual theology, right? Mm-hmm. We talk systematic theology or biblical theology or whatever the other theologies are. Contextual theology, though, is interesting in that it means that we have to examine our context in light of God, right? You can whittle that down. Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, home of CGSC, SAMS, and y'all know the other ones, schools that are here.
Right.
A unique demographic. When it comes to contextual theology, the question is going to be, have we looked at the dynamics and the demographics at play here, and then how the Fort Leavenworth gospel service can impact those demographics? Typically you have officers that, y'all help me out, 30s, mid-30s maybe, young
32,
families
33,
that are coming through, and they're only here for a season.
Correct.
Right? So then the question is, knowing those dynamics, engaging that group year after year, then how do we become impactful? That's contextual theology. You can apply that to inner city Detroit. You could apply that to suburban Chicago, the Kansas City Metro. All those demographics are going to be different. If you think about Paul wrote to Corinth in a different way that he wrote to Ephesus, right? Because there were different contexts for which same God, but the context is different. So I think one of the things that we should do, even when it comes to the different demographics that we have, is how do we apply dynamics of contextual theology to wherever it is we are.
I
Right?
can see that, yeah.
So that means in the prison where I am, then there is a unique way that we approach
Yes.
inmates.
Right.
Right? So that is something that I use.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there, especially with the unique way of approaching different, and that's what we have to look at. I ponder this question, bringing it back in about looking at different demographics. What makes people not go to one church but go to another church? I mean, we have let's talk about right here. We have another service that runs parallel with this church, and sometimes they get people get the church's service mixed up.
Yeah.
Right.
They come down here, but they'll leave here and go there, or they'll go up there and leave there and come here.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
So,
You're absolutely
And that's what I was addressing. Is there something wrong with that? I don't know. I can't. I have a preference. But I would tell you I don't know. There's a thing, and I wrote this down. This is what I was writing down earlier. So I do a lot of church consulting. And now y'all know. I do a lot of church consulting with different leaderships, and this is a question that we deal with quite often. And there's a fun little exercise that I do pretty much wherever I go. I have not done it here, but for a number of reasons. But Tom Schultz, if y'all listening, Tom Schultz has a book called "Why Nobody Wants to Go to Church Anymore." I think that's the name of the book. Tom Schultz, I know his name. Look it up. And in that, the end goal is showing ultimate love. I mean, it's what and I disagree ultimately with his conclusion, but he does something that's really interesting. He talks about 6 types of churches.
okay.
He talks about the police church, where it's all about rules and regulations, do's and don'ts, right? He talks about the museum, where you go into museums and you see the history, but you can't touch anything. He talks about the mortuary, where people go to die. He talks about the theater church, where it's about the show, right? It's about entertaining. Political action church, which it's about social agendas. It's about how God impacts community. And then the last one is the seminary, where it is about learning and education. What I like to do with leaders, probably the first couple of days, is get down and go through just a practical exercise. When you think about your church, where are you when it comes to these 6 types of churches? Are you more of a police church? Are you more of a museum? Where are you? What I found is a lot of times, even dealing with different age groups, most people not too far off. The difference is small, but can we speak the same language, right?
Right.
So, for instance, if the young people want more of a show, let's say we all corporately say, right now, Fort Leavenworth Gospel Service is at a 6 when it comes to the show.
Okay.
But the young people wanted to be an 8. That's not much movement, right?
Right.
So the engaging question for the young people is, well, what can we do in your mind to move from a 6?
Okay.
Yeah. And we're listening at that point, right? Or me, I like seminary. I mean, anybody been around me know I'm a nerd. So then the question is, what can we do to enhance our Bible classes? What can we do to enhance our worship service that we bring more of that theological piece in, right? But typically you're not far off. Now I would say there's some, maybe the police and some of that other stuff that you want to stay away from, mortuary. But then what is it that you identified that the church is a mortuary? And then how do we move away from that?
Right. So you're trying to gauge where we need to push the needle.
Yeah.
Whether we need to push the needle up or down.
Yeah.
To grasp large audience.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good test, because I would have really never thought about that. Because now when you mention theater, right, it brings me over to one of the other topics I was going to bring up: live streaming audiences. Okay, how do we look at now live streaming with church? because it's become big, right? So I'll give you a stat real quick that I looked up. So over the last 35 years, 69% of the United States churches have lost about 25 to 30% of their congregation. Okay, whether it be due to death, geographic, relocation,
Some reason.
whatever the case is, they have lost about 25 to 30% of their congregation population, right? So when we go to live streaming now, in the era that we're in, I mean, it had started already.
It did.
With certain places, certain venues like Elevation Worship, Lakewood, places like that.
All places have started.
Yeah, they had started doing that. Some people got television broadcasts or whatever. But then COVID happened. So we go from probably a 10%, 12% market of live streaming now to maybe 80%.
Much larger.
Okay? What happens at that point? And Sam, I'm going to direct this to you. What happens at that point when we're all free and clear from COVID? Right? How do we get those people back?
I think that's going to be somewhat kind of hard. The reason I say that, a lot of people, in my opinion, they got comfortable of doing the live stream at home, drinking their coffee in their bathrobe, not getting dressed to come in. But I do think there is a small group, not going to say small, but there is a certain percentage of people. They do like coming in. They do like the fellowship. They do like the camaraderie that's coming in. So, but you got to figure out how to bring everyone back in. I don't know. I think maybe some type of church gathering, a special event or something like that. You have to bring those numbers in slowly. Because even when you do that, I don't think all the numbers are going to come back right away. It's going to catch on. You probably bring another 10, another 15, and get the word out. But I think that it's still going to be that number of people that's still going to watch it from afar. Because that had already started, especially with television broadcast. A lot of people, that's another form of streaming, the television broadcast. They just watch it from home. And they feel perfectly good with that. I forget what they call it, bedside Baptist,
bedside Baptist,
something like that,
Yeah.
And they feel that they're getting what they need, but it is going to be a challenge, I believe, to get those numbers. You're going to have to have like another celebration, reopening of the church, tell everybody to come in, and hopefully we can catch on to those numbers. Because, in my opinion, I think a lot of people are comfortable, like I said, just watching it from home, and they feel like what they get, and then they'll call their few friends and see, do you hear that? You see that?
Right.
All right, let's go to lunch.
I mean, we all know the three biggest days.
Yeah, CME.
That's right.
Christmas,
Mother's Day,
Easter.
And I get me wrong. I think that we should be celebrating when people do come to church, regardless of when it is, right? I remember when I was in the Army, we did a survey, and it was dealing with alcoholism. Okay, and the counselor that gave the survey out was asking a question. Now, I don't drink alcohol or anything like that, and so all my stuff was 0, 0, 0. So you look around, and so they're asking, so who had a 4? People raising their hand. Who had a 3? People raising their hand, whatever. And so you had a 0, you're fine. Who had a 1? So 1, right? People raising their hands were 1. So the people that had a 1 were the ones that drank on special occasions. Okay, socially, like I'm going out. Somebody got a promotion, I'm going to drink. New Year's came around. Birthday, and that's the only time that they drank alcohol. So they said that person was a controlled alcoholic, a very controlled alcoholic, right? And I thought that was very funny when that came out. So now when you look at that when it comes to church, right? Do you say that this person is a dedicated church-going person because they know when they want to go to church? Or do you just think that they're just picking and choosing because it's a special day? I mean, how do you view that?
You see, I think that's a theological dilemma. that we have to parse out, right? Does God support technological advances, right?
Okay.
That is the quintessential question that we have to parse. Let me give you an example. So Matthew chapter 5, and it runs through like chapter 7 or 7. Sermon on the Mount or hill, whatever you want to call it, right? Jesus is there, and he's longest discourse that's ever recorded by Jesus, right? 5 to 10,000 people are there. Now, mind you, I want you to picture this. Days before the megaphone, days before the microphone and speakers. Now, the question is going to be, could 10,000 people without some kind of aid hear Jesus?
Well, they'll say that goes from the valleys.
No, the answer is no.
Right.
I mean, there were people there that probably could not
Hear what he's
Hear what
saying.
you're saying? Yeah.
So then, now, and I know some seminarians, they like that argument's flawed. But then the question would be, would Jesus use a microphone? Would Jesus use technology to reach those masses? Now, you could argue that at least they're there.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
at least we're there.
Whether they heard what he was saying or not, they were there.
So then it comes to questions like you ask. Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembling of yourselves together, which is a manner of some. Then what does a Hebrew writer mean when he talks about forsaking, right? Utterly abandoning the worship service because of persecution, because of whatever the case, you utterly abandon it. So then, if I'm able to marry technology with attendance and can still meet whatever it is that is established within that community is worship, is that vain worship? Now, that is the contextual question. That is the theological question, right? I don't know the answer to that in all circumstances, but I am saying that's what we grapple with. Now, young people will say, well, I can do all this at home. I can have my communion cup. I can give online. I can listen to the sermon. I can sing along with the choir.
I'm home.
What's the difference?
Right.
Now, that's for us as leaders to parse that stuff out. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer.
Right.
But I am saying that is the contextual theological question that we have to answer.
Because from our time, I think we look at successful service, successful church on the number of people that's here.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Or money that they giving.
Yeah,
Right.
That's a whole nother.
Yeah.
But what you're saying, if they're at home, being reached, are you still reaching? But I guess we're not calculating that, or not. Like you say, we don't have the answer to that. We don't know.
I mean, and there are scripture on both sides, right? Paul will say in 1 Corinthians, I want to say it's 11, probably around verse number 19. First of all, when you come together as a church, right? So there'll be people on the other side that will say that when it's used, that word ecclesia is used, then it always means people coming together. That's the ecclesia, but it's the people, right? It's the people coming together. It is not the building. Well, I got it. I got it. They come together in some kind of place. With technology, it's possible for us to come together and not be physically co-located.
Right.
That's true.
Which is a theological question that we got to deal with it.
Right. So which brings us around to the original question. What is the perception of the church today? And not necessarily in the sense of, the negative standpoint, but in how do people perceive church today? Do you have to be in the four walls to come to church? Do you have to mingle with people to come to church? Because you're gathered together in the name of Christ through technology, right? Not necessarily in the building.
Yeah.
So, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Because, yeah, everybody wants to see their congregation there.
Services, and I'm not afraid to articulate that thought. Service there at 1000 and a contemporary service and a gospel service. Well, we recognize the distinct difference in styles of worship. Right? So if we're honest, then what is it that I don't like about that style of worship?
Okay.
It's too passive for me, right? I mean, is there anything wrong with that? I don't know. I mean, you be the judge, but that's why I don't. With. There aren't songs that inspire me. There aren't songs that motivate me. So if you ask me, would I attend regularly the contemporary service? No.
Okay.
Because it is not a service for me. And we're talking, if you use my types, right, or Schultz's type, they're not mine, I can claim them. But there's not enough show for me.
Right.
Okay. And I mean that in the pure sense of show. It's not my style. I like hip hop. They're more like opera. Not my style. Right. But if we think about kids and church, kids, and I'm talking young kid, man, that church too much like a police state. Too many rules and regulations. I don't want to go there.
Or museum.
You're right.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's about the history of, but we can't change anything. Right. So, and I think that, but we have to be honest about that, right? The preaching is too passive for me at the contemporary service. I want somebody that's going to actively engage me and challenge me to do better. I want people that are going to challenge me in a sermon that to experience God in every facet of my. Let's not just talk about God. Let's meet God. And so I can go on and on, but I think you get my point.
Yeah. Definitely.
But that's exactly why, I wouldn't say exactly why, but a lot of the younger generation, they're looking for something different.
Yeah.
They're starting their own churches.
Right.
I know a young guy in the community there where he started his own, and he doesn't meet within the church. He goes to a gymnasium, and he has his, which is growing, go from one location to another, and not in the same one every weekend. You know.
So he's doing a pop-up church.
But it's working.
Right.
And he's every time you're getting more and more people joining too. So.
And see, and that's the type of ministry that I think that we miss.
Well, that's different from what we were brought.
But that's what I'm saying, right? But the going out and reaching people.
You got a question?
Okay, got a question.
List the 6 types of church again.
List your 6 types of churches.
They're not mine. Police, museum, mortuary, theater, political action church, and seminary. Those are the 6. But you know, I think Brother Sam is on to something. Because then the pop-up church.
Right.
I look at that, and my first reaction is, man, that's crazy, right? It's my first reaction. But then if we apply this idea of a contextual theology, is it right? Right? Is it right? So Jesus tells a parable. I want to say Matthew 13-ish. I don't know. I really don't know this one. Matthew, one of my friends said, man, you know what this stuff is. I don't know if this one's it. But he tells the parable of the dragnet, right?
Okay.
And I had to work with that parable for a little while. These fishers, they go out and they throw that net.
Right.
And it says in that net they caught all kind of fish.
Yes.
And they brought it in to the shore and they separated the good from the bad, right? And I had to work with that. And I had to wrestle with that. And I got in trouble about it because I preached a sermon about the parable of the dragnet. And and my conclusion was it's going to be a bunch of people in the kingdom. And I see the kingdom different than the church, than what we think. They're going to be homosexual, they're going to be Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists, they're going to be some of everybody in the kingdom. It seems that Jesus' point was, when that gospel message is spread, anyone that hears that gospel message then becomes accountable to kingdom. Right?
Right. And that
Man.
is Matthew 13:46.
I was good. I was looking at it, looking for it myself. But it's going to be a whole bunch of people in the kingdom.
Yes.
Right? Because they become accountable then to the gospel message. But then that's saying something different than how we do church. This young man, I assume, is preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And bringing people. Then we have to parse out, is it right or wrong, right? I'm saving that to better minds than mine.
Yeah.
But I am saying that we have to use what we have to be able to parse out some of these hard theological questions.
Well, and again, it goes back to the message of quit church, right? Let's stop doing church the way that we are doing it, or the way that we have been doing it, and let's do something different, but that still edifies and glorifies God. You know, if Jesus went around and he grabbed people and he spoke messages, same thing this young man is doing, that's not wrong.
No.
Okay? Staying traditional in the 6 pillars of the idea of what type of church you want, right? Is that necessarily wrong? No, but if it fits you, it fits you. However, people are looking for a place to worship, and they're looking for a place to call home. And so then that's when you start having the church hoppers, right? So
Yeah,
again,
they're looking for a church.
and they're looking for a church. So the perception of church when people walk into the gospel service is, hey, this is a theater. This is where I want to be. And some people may walk into here and say, hey, this is more of a theater style church, but I'm looking for something more museum-like.
Yeah.
And it happens.
And they
People come here, they sit here, and
They sit here,
get up and go
they'll
somewhere.
get up and they'll go somewhere.
My wife, I don't think she would mind me saying, she like fire and brimstone.
Right.
She like a police church.
Yeah.
I do not.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, now, is there anywhere that in those pillars in his book where you can have a mixture of?
Well, no, that's not the premise of the book.
Okay.
That is not the
Okay.
premise of the book is radical love.
Got it.
This is just a good exercise that I use. This
Okay.
is something that I pulled out from the book
Okay.
to help influence and guide a discussion with leaders about how to lead by influence.
Got it.
Right, and then engage others in a conversation that brings about change, right? So I depart from his ultimate conclusion about radical love. I depart from that because it's too touchy-feely for me. And I don't think it address. That's not taking nothing away from his book. It's just too touchy-feely for me because I deal with real stuff. In my life, I don't have... I'm not afforded the luxury to not be political action sensitive, in my experience.
Right.
So this idea that God loves everybody, sometimes I don't experience that acutely. So on the macro level, yeah, God loves everybody.
Right.
But when that narrows down to me on the micro level, I don't feel that. And so, again, so I understand the idea of radical love, but this helped me more than that concept. So, especially when it comes to guiding leaders through a discussion about something as sensitive as what we're talking about today.
All right. Sam, what you got on that?
Well, what I was about to say is, as I'm thinking about hearing everyone's perspective, is I was going to say it's just not one cookie cutter, to get everybody, and we have to look at what we're trying to achieve. When I say trying to achieve, are we looking at having everybody come to one service and have the numbers here, or are we looking at people trying to hear the message? And there's just not one cookie cutter answer. As Chaplain Pooh said, he doesn't have the answer. I don't have the answer. But people are being reached out there, just not our traditional way. And I think that what makes the world go around is the differences of people. So you're going to find different things to reach different people.
Yeah, no, I agree with that assessment. I think, in my understanding of leadership, my understanding of spiritual transformation, if you will, discipleship, spiritual formation, and community. I don't think you can divorce this discussion from that community in which you worship, right? I understand that God sets forth the tenets of worship. What that looks like, though, the songs we sing, the styles of sermons we preach, the type of outreach we do, I think we practice that in community, right? In community. As small or as large as that community may be, that's where we practice it in. And that's really where I think the thrust of our conversation should focus. For instance, what do we do, again, the macro level, in black churches to usher boys into manhood, right? And then if you take that to the micro, right, we're talking about reaching young people, then how do we, as a Fort Leavenworth gospel service, issue young men into manhood or women into womanhood, right? Or what do we teach our singles about single parenting? Or it goes on and on and on and on and on. What do we do? What do we do? What is our thrust? What is our focus? And I think that'll be attractive to some and won't be attractive to others.
I mean, you make a really good point. I think at the end of the day, when we look at what we've discussed today, and I the phrase "end of the day," we have to be mindful of what we're talking about, because people may come up and ask us questions about church, and we got to be ready to give a solid answer and not kind of tap dance and tiptoe around it. I remember a group that we had here, a group of teenagers that we had here. One of them, Christina, she was willing to go out and ask somebody out here on the sidewalk right outside these doors, do you know Jesus? She wanted to know. She said, and we tested her. Are you afraid to profess your faith? And she said, no. She went up to a couple walking down the street and said, I just wanted to know, do you guys know Jesus? And the couple was startled. And we sat there and we watched her, and she had a conversation. She had about a 5-minute conversation with them. And we have to be bold in that sense, to be able to ask people out on the street, and ask them, do you know Jesus? And invite them into not just this service.
I was going to say that'll attract people in.
Exactly.
And that's what Schultz goes with that. Radical love, he talks about radical hospitality, which is kind of where you're going with that one, and something else. I forget the third tenet that it'll come to me here in a minute. But yeah, all of that has to do with engaging people.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
So with engaging people is one point I do want to mention before we wrap up here, is that, because I've seen this, if the church tries to remain rigid and strict in their traditional ways, it can end up dying. I've been to a church where all you see is because they don't want change, the 50 become the 60, 60 become the 70, but you don't have the 20 and 30 there no more. And next thing you know, preachers to the congregation of two 70-year-olds, and there's no one else there. So
They've aged out, and those churches aren't good at adjusting and adapting to change. give you an example. I know I like to tell stories.
Go ahead. No.
Stories sometimes are good. So I was telling Brother Moore, son came and said, "Hey Dad, I'm thinking about moving out." I said, "Good." I said, "Man, I'm proud of you, man." And he's like, "Why?" I said, "Man, I didn't think this day was gonna come. I thought it was gonna end differently." "What you mean by that, Dad?" I said, "Man, I thought I was gonna kick you out." I said, "Man, we had some rough years." And he started smiling like, "Yeah, we did. Like you always tell me to get out." And now, mind you, I'm the ghetto chaplain. I don't mind saying that. I put a word in there that I won't use on. You ask me in private. I'm gonna kick you out. He's smiling like, "Yeah, I know you will." I said, "Man, I'm proud of you. Man, not only have you turned your grades around, you know, you're halfway done with a bachelor's degree. You got money in your bank. You got a car that's paid for." I said, "Son, you ready. You got a better start in life than I did, right?" I said, "Man, you're doing. It is that I had to change, not him. He's doing what he needs to do as a young man through the stages of life."
Yeah.
Now, my wife heard the same comment. "Why you tell him that?" "Why not? You think he really ready?" "He says he is." Right? We've got two different approaches.
Yeah.
She reminds me of that church that you're talking about. Right? It's stuck in parent-child mode. I had to adjust to now I'm man to man. Right? I'm still parent. But my role has adjusted. He doesn't need much parenting anymore as much as he needs a man.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm saying that sometimes churches don't make that shift.
Correct. Okay. And, if they don't,
And
they're
we
gonna die.
have to be able to recognize when that shift has to happen. Right? Now, I'm not talking, I love my wife. My wife is an excellent, way better parent than I am. I will tell y'all that. But you know what has changed though with my son now is when he asks theological questions, he come right to Daddy. Right, Dad, I don't agree with this. And we'll sit there and we'll talk about it, adult to adult. I don't beat him up with the Bible. We have these conversations which I hope keeps him engaged. I don't know what the end result is going to be. I think that is between him and God. I can only play my role at this time.
Right.
Yep. So it's a great point.
I agree with you. I told my son, I said, you know, I'm more of an advisor to you now.
Yeah.
I'm still your parent.
Yeah.
But I'm more of an advisor, and you take it for what you want. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
So the role changed.
Yeah.
So the roles of the churches have to change.
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that's funny that we're talking about our sons because even with my son Jordan, you know, Jordan's 20 years old now, and he's getting to that point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know my wife tells me, she says, "Look, you know, you need to be more advisor and less daddy because he's going to get to a point where you're going to say things and he's going to do the opposite of what you say, and he's not always going to listen to you." You know, and I feel I think we're hitting it on the head. Our perception right here in the church right now, I think we're hitting it on the head is that as the parent, even as that pastor, sometimes when you're that senior pastor, right, and people come to you and say, "Hey, what are we going to do about the little ones? What are we going to do about the young folk?" Right? Now you need to be more in an advisory role and be able to accept that advice as well to start moving in a direction to get those kids because you know we're parenting as pastors, but as the older you get, right? As the older you get, now you also need some advisement too on how to bring those people in
Because it's changed.
Four phases of parenting. Command them, you tell them what to do when they're young. Start working them into the place where they become a man.
That's
the
right.
Consultant, which is where you are with your son, which we're all with our sons now at this point. Hey, here's what you might be able to do. Here's a way you can do it. It's up to you to make that decision now.
Yeah, and I'm saying we need to do that with all demographics, right? Whatever we consider the marginalized, right? Sometimes we have to shift. Sometimes they need Now I'll change that a little bit. Sometimes they need the pastor.
Right.
Sometimes.
The clergy.
Yeah,
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
But sometimes you see Jesus as the counselor, right? And I'm saying that sometimes Jesus is that fatherly figure or that motherly figure, that nurturer. But I'm saying that we need to do that with all demographics, and sometimes we fail as the church.
You're right.
Now again, I'm talking kingdom, big, macro.
Right.
Now I'm talking church, where it comes to how we really experience God. On that micro level, then we have to be able to recognize when we need to shift, and sometimes we fail at that. I think that's why the perception is so bad. That's my own opinion.
And so,
Great
so
opinions.
we're ready to wrap up. Byron, do we have any other questions? Any other comments?
There was a comment, great point. It's a transition when parenting our adult children, being less directive and more of a consultant and advisor. Learning how to listen more and talk less. It can be challenging, but so rewarding. Cape Eric Moore.
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, Brother Moore always has some wise words for everybody, I'll tell you that. Well, that's our time for this session, this month of our table talk. I will tell you that people's perception is their reality.
Yeah, perception is reality.
That is their reality. And we can't change people's minds just by talking. We have to change people's minds by doing.
Correct.
And that's one of the biggest things that I think that the church as a whole, again, the macro, as Craig says, that's the perception, that's the problem as a whole that we have to solve as a big church. And so what my asking and challenge is for everybody is to go out and speak to somebody about the church. Whether it's your church or just church in general, and tell them that, yeah, God is love. God is here to love you, to nurture you, to guide you, and you have to be able to listen and follow God's guidance. And because I can't change your mind by speaking, I have to change your mind by doing.
Right.
You know, if I say I'm going to come and cut your grass tomorrow, you're only going to believe it when you hear the lawnmower running and I'm out there doing it. Okay?
Person of your word.
That's right. So that's what I say today is that be the doer, not the sayer, and get somebody's mind focused on the right thing when it comes to the church versus the negative.
Yeah.
With that being said, next month we will be talking about the perception of mental health inside the church. I will have a different cast next week, next month as well. Again, we meet the fourth Saturday of every month at 10 o'clock right here on Facebook Live. Our church service is at 10 o'clock every Sunday right here on Facebook Live. And for those of you that are watching that want to come out, come on out. We're sitting right here at 500 Pope Avenue in Fort Leavenworth. Again, I'm Brother Clayton Bridget, Chaplain Craig Poole, Sam Moore. Love God, love people. And thank you, Brother Byron, for filling in for Brother Mac.
Hey, man.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate it.
And I just say thanks to you for allowing me to be part of this opportunity.
Oh, definitely. It won't be your last time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and by the way, everybody, this is Craig's last time on camera.
No,
For quite some time.
no.
He's going to be PCSing, and we wish him all of God's love.
I'll probably be back though.
Yeah.
Or maybe we can hit them up with this new technology, Zoom or something. You know?
I'll be back.
All right. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we love you just as much as God loves you.
Yes.